We'll be doing TCU. So, first I'll talk a little bit about the head coach, and then I'll talk some about the roster, and then I'll go through their schedule game by game and give you a predicted winner and loser for each game. So, head coach at Sonny Dykes enters his third season as the head coach at TCU and is at 14th season as a head coach. So he was the head coach at three other places before TCU, Louisiana Tech, California, and SMU. At Louisiana Tech, he went 22 and 15, and then California, he only went 19 and 30. And then at SMU, he went 30 and 18. His overall record as a head coach is 89 and 72, which is not that good. So amazing coaching job in his first season at TCU. They were a team that only won 5 games the year before he got there, and then he took them to a national championship game and a 13 and 2 record. But then his second season, they were right back to how they were right before he got there at 5 and 7. So his record overall at TCU is 18 and 9. And I'm not real high on him as a coach. I think that TCU will probably improve some this year, but other than that one season in 2022, he's not done anything real impressive as a head coach, in my opinion. So in recruiting, uh, his first full recruiting class in 2023 ranked at 21, and then a second recruiting class ranked at 34 in 2024, and I think that probably had to do with record. They got a pretty good recruiting class in 2023 because they had a really good season in 2022, and then it fell off in 2024 because their record fell off. So now starting on the offensive side of the roster at quarterback, the quarterback this year will be Josh Hoover, only a three-star quarterback recruit. He started the last 6 games of the season last year and played in 8 games. And he had in the 6 games that he started 2,037 passing yards and 13 touchdown passes and 62.6% completion percentage, and he averaged 7.4 yards per throw. He seemed to be a solid quarterback, and I think they'll be in pretty good shape at quarterback with him. And at wide receiver, they're really good here. At TCU has one of the Big 12 conferences best receiving units this year. So they returned their top receiver from last season, Savion Williams, who had in 11 games 41 catches and 573 yards and 4 touchdowns, averaging 14 yards a catch. And then they also returned John Paul Richardson, who led them in catches last season with 46 and had 536 yards and 3 touchdowns, averaging 11.7 a catch. And then they bring in a good receiver from Boise State. His name is Eric McAllister, who had in only 9 games last season 47 catches for 873 and 5 touchdowns, averaging a really impressive 18.6 a catch. And then they bring in a good tight end from Baylor. His name is Drake Dabney, who had last season there 552 yards on 33 catches and 5 touchdowns, averaging a really impressive 16.7 a catch. So the passing game, I think, is going to be really good for TCU. But running back is a concern. They lose their one good running back from last season, Amani Bailey, who's off to the NFL, and they don't have any proven running backs to take over for him. Someone's going to need to step up there. And the offensive line overall does not look great. Only 2 starters return. And they did bring in 5 transfers, though, including a center from Alabama, James Brockermeyer, who was the top center recruit of 2021, but has only played 30 snaps in college. But he'll be their starting center this year, and he should help their offensive line out. So I think TCU's offense is going to be kind of one-dimensional this year. Not very good at running the football, but good at throwing the football. So then moving on to the defensive side, the defensive line overall isn't really great. They lose their best player there from last season, Dominic Williams, who transferred out to Oklahoma this spring. And they do return 2 starters, but they were not great for them last year. And they do bring in 2 transfers, though. They bring in a transfer from Tulane, Devon DL, who had last season 43 tackles and 4 sacks and 3 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery and an interception and 2 pass breakups and 8 total pressures. And then they bring in a transfer from Notre Dame, Nane Osifo Munzon. Uh, I don't know if I pronounced that name right or not. It's such a weird name, but he was a 4-star recruit, and he didn't start any games for Notre Dame last season, but he played in 12 games and had 20 tackles and 3 sacks and 5 total pressures last season, and I think he'll start on the defensive line. And at linebacker, TCU looks really good. This is one of the conference's best linebacker units. So they return Namdio Bizer, uh, who had last season 84 tackles and 4 sacks and 2 pass breakups and 10 total pressures and a fumble recovery. And then they have Johnny Hodges coming back, who only played in 4 games last season because of an injury, but in 2022, he led the team in tackles with 87 in 14 games and also had 2 sacks and a pass breakup that year. And then they have Shad Banks, who had 62 tackles and a sack and a, 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 a pass breakup and a forced fumble and 11 total pressures last season. And then they bring in a really good linebacker from California, Caleb Alarms Orr, who led California in tackles last season with 92 and had 6 pass breakups and a sack and an interception and a forced fumble and fumble recovery and 7 total pressures in 12 games. And then in the secondary, TCU was horrible last season. They ranked 110 at stopping the pass, giving up 253.7 yards a game. But I think that's going to be much improved this year. So at safety, they return Bud Clark, who is a really good player. He has in 24 games these past 2 seasons combined 78 tackles and 8 interceptions and 10 pass breakups. And then they bring in a transfer from Nevada, Richard Tony, who had last season 65 tackles and a sack and a pass breakup and 2 defensive touchdowns. And they also add in a transfer from Memphis, Cam Smith, who had in 12 games 57 tackles and 6 pass breakups and 3 interceptions and uh, 2 pressures. And at cornerback, they look pretty good here. And also at safety, they have uh, Abe Kamara, who has in 27 games these past 2 seasons, only starting 10 games, 93 tackles and 8 pass breakups. And then they bring in a transfer corner from Utah, Travis Broughton, who has in 26 games these past two seasons combined 83 tackles and three pass breakups. And they also bring in a transfer cornerback from Old Dominion, Lamarion James, who had last season 60 tackles and seven pass breakups and two forced fumbles and two defensive touchdowns, one pick six and one fumble recovery for a touchdown. And then special teams looks to be pretty questionable. They lose both specialists from last season, but this roster has a lot of talent. The defense should be very solid this year after being horrible last year, and the offense it should be overall solid too. So now moving on to the predictions, they begin the year on a Friday night, going on the road to destroy Stanford. This will be an easy win. Stanford's one of the worst teams in the country, maybe as bad as the Coach Prime Colorado Clown Show that TCU lost to in the opener last year. They've got to beat a team like Stanford to be taken seriously at all this year, and I think they'll do it easily. And then they play some team called Long Island. I have no idea what that team is, but I know from the name that it's an FCS team that they'll destroy. So then they play their first conference game of the year at home against Central Florida. Central Florida's offense, I think, is going to be pretty good. It's going to be pretty balanced. They've got a good quarterback now, and they've got some good options at receiver, and they've got maybe the best running back unit in the conference this year. And defensively, their defense is pretty solid too, everywhere. But their line of scrimmage at play isn't great either. And overall, these two teams look pretty similar to me. So I'm just going to go with a home team and say TCU wins a really close one. But I think there'll be quite a few points scored in this game. So then they play on the road at SMU. SMU, I think, will probably be in the top half of the Power Four in their first season in the Power Four. And they actually have a whole lot of Power Four transfers on their roster. I think they'll have a pretty good year this year. Uh, and I actually think that with this game being on the road, SMU gets this win. But I think it'll be a very close game, and I wouldn't be surprised if TCU won. So then they play on the road at Kansas. I think this will be a pretty close game, but this is a bad matchup for TCU's offense because they're a passing team, and the strength of Kansas's defense is their secondary. Kansas is going to have one of the best secondaries in the Big 12 this year. And TCU, I don't really think can take advantage much of Kansas's pretty weak front seven and run the football a whole lot in this game. And Kansas's offense is going to be good. Again, it's going to be very balanced. Now, their play at the line of scrimmage isn't that good either, but I think that Kansas will score a lot of points in this game and win it by like a touchdown. So then they play Houston on a Friday. So Houston, I don't think is going to be very good this year. Now I know all about this coach from Tulane that they brought in, being a coach that got them to two really good seasons these past two seasons. But if you look him up, you'll see that those weren't his only two seasons as Tulane's head coach. He'd actually been their head coach a while before that happened, and they weren't very good. So I think it's going to take him some time at Houston to get them to being a pretty good team. I think this could be a pretty close game, but I don't see TCU losing this one. So then they play on the road at Utah after they get a week off. Utah's play at the line of scrimmage is a lot better than TCU's, and their defense everywhere else, not just the line, is also good. And Utah's offense is balanced. They're going to be a much better rushing team than TCU, and they're also going to be good at throwing it with Cameron Rising back at quarterback and Brent Cuthie back at tight end and bring in Dorian Singer at wide receiver. And of course, they've got some other playmakers at receiver too. So I think Utah is clearly the better team, and they're the better coach team too. With Kyle Whittingham, he's a much better coach than Sonny Dykes is, in my opinion. And I think it'll be pretty close, but Utah will win by like a touchdown. So then they play Texas Tech at home. So not a huge difference between these two teams. Texas Tech, I think, is a much better rushing team than TCU, but I think TCU is a little bit better at throwing the football. And neither team's play at the line of scrimmage is great. And I do like TCU's defense a little better, though, than Texas Tech's. I think they're a little bit better team. And playing at home, I'm not going to pick against TCU. But I think this will be a close one. So then on the road at Baylor, this one will probably be pretty close. Baylor's offense, I think, will improve this year, but I don't think Baylor's defense is really going to be improved much, if any. I think they're still really going to struggle on that side of the ball. And I think TCU is just the better team, and even on the road, they get this win. Then they play Oklahoma State at home. A possible game where TCU could pull an upset. Oklahoma State's offensive line, though, is going to be really good, and they're going to be a really good rushing team and a great passing team. A much more balanced offense than TCU's. And TCU, though, can, I think, take advantage of a weakness at cornerback with Oklahoma State in this game. And Oklahoma State's linebackers, though, are really good. And I don't really think that TCU can take big advantage of Oklahoma State's defensive line not being very good because, they don't have great running backs or a great offensive line. So I think this will be pretty close, but I'm going with Oklahoma State to still win. And Mike Gundy, is a very good coach. I think he'll win the coaching battle in this one. Then they play Arizona after getting a week off at home. So I do think that TCU is going to get one win this year against a team they're not supposed to beat, and I think this is it. So I picked them to beat Arizona instead of Oklahoma State because Arizona I don't think is as good, and they also get a week off to prepare more for this game. So I think there'll be quite a few points scored in this one. Arizona's quarterback Fafada is better than TCU's quarterback, and I like Arizona's running back unit much better than TCU's. And of course, Arizona has that really good receiver McMillan, but they don't have as good of a unit of wide receivers as TCU. And Arizona is going to have a solid offensive line. And on defense, Arizona does have a few really good players, but they're not going to be great overall on this side of the ball. So I do think this will be really close, though. But I really don't see a big difference between Arizona and TCU. So then they end the year on the road at Cincinnati, a horrible team. I think they'll win even on the road. Then my final prediction for TCU is 8-4 overall and 6-3 in the conference. So this won't give them any chance to get to the Big 12 championship game, but it's a nice improvement from last season. And I think they're a team that, at worst case, will go 6-6. I think they're for sure get to a bowl game this year, but I don't really see them doing much better than this. So that will be it with this video, and please subscribe and thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.